Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys in a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me is Mike. We're going to do our weekly comic book news. We've been doing a couple different types of videos on the channel, but what we'll try to do weekly now is just do a weekly comic book news sort of video. What we'll do in that, we'll kind of talk about four different topics and sort of break those down, kind of carry through. So for us, what we wanted to talk this week, very, very light week of new comics for this week. So we're going to talk about the best new comics of this week. We're going to talk about, sadly, the passing of a legendary DC and Marvel creator. We'll also talk a little bit about some updates with what's going on with Diamond and how Diamond is handling some things and how that's affecting the industry. And then we have one other book we'll talk about as well this week where some delays absolutely killed the book and just talk about the overall problems that's causing in the industry as well. We'll lead off with our first topic. The big debut for this month, the big debut for this week at least, Captain America #1, Chip Zdarsky. I think this is a Marvel Rivals kind of variant cover. That was the last one they had at the store. Cap's been out of action for a bit. Cap has not had a solo series. I think we're going on, it was close to 6 or 7 months with no Steve Rogers #1 book. His last two series lasted less than 20 issues. And then were canceled. He's not currently Captain America in the Avengers. They have Sam Wilson occupying that role. So there's been a lot of struggles getting Steve Rogers going lately. And with it being Independence Day, I guess it's good timing here for the Marvel to get out a Captain America book. We'll talk a little bit about this book and then just talk about what me and Mike are seeing as a problem with the way the industry's handling Steve Rogers and how that's going. So as far as this book, this is Chip Zdarsky. Zdarsky is interesting in that, Mike, I think you've liked some of his stuff. I really liked his Daredevil. I did not like his Batman, but I think he's a good writer overall. I get Valerio Schiti on the art on this. It's a well-drawn book. It's a well-illustrated book. There's some interesting wrinkles, and I think overall this was an interesting debut for Captain America. I think definitely enough that I would pick up the subsequent issues. There's some interesting revelations. It's basically a book set where Cap is coming out of the ice for the first time. So it's Marvel sort of resetting that period a little bit with some new wrinkles thrown in. I think there's a lot of interesting things there. However, what we're going to talk about, not so much talking about this issue, but Michael, could get to you on this. Cap has struggled to keep a title for a while. Why do you think it is that Marvel's struggling so much with Steve Rogers lately? And that this is a character, yeah, his first series, before there was a Marvel Comics got canceled. But largely, since he came out of the ice in the Avengers and got his own solo book, it's never been an issue for Steve to keep a book. And lately, there just seems to be a churn on the character where he canceled. Why do you think Marvel's struggling so much with Steve Rogers lately?
I think they strayed away from who Steve was, and I think as a company they decided to prop up other characters, and instead of Steve. But Captain America was a solid book. Like when I was a kid in the '70s, I was reading that book every month, and his sidekick, the Falcon, was amazing. For a kid to see those two battling crime and going after, Zemo and everything, it was a good comic, but it was good because Steve was, the all-American guy, and his buddy, the Falcon, was, amazing, and they just were a great team. Mm-hmm. And then, more recently, I think they've really tried to, in the last 20 years or so, they've really tried to, I think they lost their focus on Steve. And I think it may have been in part kind of like the Big Blue Boy Scout for Superman kind of thing, where they tried to break him down and make him into something that he wasn't, where, these are truly aspirational characters. That's why people love them. And once you leave that on the table, I mean, you could have an Elseworld story, or you could have a short series where, you examine that part of that character, but then you got to get back to Steve. So that's what I'm hopeful about this, is that we get back to the All-American Captain America,
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the fact that they've made him a Nazi, they had, what was his name, Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? A title that for Captain America that just wasn't very flattering of Steve Rogers. I look at the way they had him show up in X-Men 97, where Rogue basically treats him like crap and acts like he's the problem. I think that what's happened to Steve Rogers is, like you said, I think there's been an effort to prop up other characters. They have, sadly, you and I both love Sam Wilson. They have sadly tried to prop him up, and by doing that, I think they felt like the only way we can really do that is to push Steve down, which is, I think, a net negative for everybody because if you like Sam Wilson, you probably like Steve Rogers. And if you like Steve Rogers, you probably like Sam Wilson. And so it's kind of a weird decision to put that against each other. I think the primary reason the book has struggled, and it will be interesting to see if Zdarsky can overcome this. And I was optimistic in this, and that there was a great scene in this book where Steve Rogers meets Mr. Fantastic, and Mr. Fantastic is kind of helping him out a little bit. He's asked because the main mission they're setting up is he's going to go to Latveria and confront Doom in this. And so he goes to Reed Richards for advice. And Reed Richards is just, he's a little bit like in awe of like, this is the guy that I grew up idolizing. Like I had your action figure. And it was a cool scene to have that because that's who Steve Rogers should be. He should feel awkward with it, which he does, but he should be the guy that people look at as like, man, you're the legend. You're the Sentinel of Liberty, man, like Captain America. And I think they lost that a little bit, not
In the
only because
movies, they did it brilliantly with Coulson. Remember
yeah,
Coulson? Like he had
Coulson,
little,
he interacted with him the way
yeah,
Tony Stark was constantly like, my dad thought you were like the great, they did
exactly.
such a great job with that. And like you said, I think there's been this concerted effort of we don't want him to be that. He needs to be something else. I think another reason that this has happened that's been difficult is you and I have talked a little bit about politics and comic books. And while I don't think it's as bad as most people paint it to be, there's certainly been an overprevalence of political stuff in comic books. And Captain America has absolutely always been a political comic book. But what I think has happened, people lately have not been able to disassociate their complaints with America and their complaints about Steve Rogers. And so I think there's been some conflation of those two things where they take like a criticism of the United States and put it on to Steve Rogers. And I think that's where you get crap like X-Men 97, where, you have Rogue lecturing him about how he didn't do enough for the mutants and
Yeah.
treating him like he's this government stooge. And it's like, that's not Steve Rogers at all. That may be you projecting how you feel about something. That's not who this character is. It's not who the character's ever been. Steve Rogers has it multiple times when the
Yeah.
government's been in the wrong, taken the A off or dropped the shield. And so it's just, I think it's bad writing. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. At the very beginning, he was aspirational in a sense where the country as a whole wanted to stay out of the conflict in Europe. We were
Mm-hmm.
very isolationist. And Jack Kirby and Joe Simon created this character to kind of help remind the country who we are
Yep.
and what the right thing is to do. And they created this character to kind of, help our country aspire to greater things. And you can be critical of America, but you got to keep Steve, pure. He's our North Star.
He's
And yeah,
Superman of the Marvel universe. He needs to
yeah,
be the beacon.
right. He's
And
our North Star. So you could have him, rather than taking him down a peg, you could have him helping us show the way, which is what he really did when Joe and Jack created him.
yeah, no, and that there's a great Captain America thing. He always says, like, I'm loyal to nothing but the dream. That's Captain America. It's not
Yeah.
he's loyal to what the country's doing. It's not that he's loyal to whatever the most,
No, that was the comedian in The Watchmen.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
and Steve is not the comedian. Those are like,
well, and that's the thing is him being a patriotic character doesn't mean he endorses that everything America's doing. He just believes in everything America should be. And I
right.
think we've had writers who can't conflate that idea with what they want to say. And so I think what we've had happen with so many of these runs is they have this like, it's got to be a book about America. Let me critique the heck out of America. Oh, but Steve's literally wearing the stars and stripes. I better take shots at him too, or have him be too overly negative, and it just feels out of character. And so,
Jack Kirby's rolling in his grave. He's like,
yeah,
that's not Cap.
No, and I'm optimistic that Zdarsky will be. This first issue was a good step in the right direction. I think I'm optimistic after that Avengers Twilight, where he wrote a really good old man Steve Rogers, that maybe he'll be able to write something interesting. But no, hopefully this gets going. It's been really sad, I think, over the last decade, and that no character has really been kicked in the teeth more than Steve Rogers, down to them making him a Nazi, a lot of stupid time displacement stuff. I mean, just so many dumb story ideas and things.
The
Hopefully,
time he
he
became
will
Red Skull,
replicate
his
what he did.
nemesis.
Yeah,
Come
no,
on, man.
they took him out of the Avengers. I just think they've got to give us back, as you said. He's got to be the big blue boy scout kind of thing, like Superman is. He's got to be that Sentinel of Liberty again for Marvel, and I think it's much like DC. When Superman is not done correctly and Superman sucks, while it's not the most important title at DC, the loss of the Superman character, being who he is, kills DC. It
Yeah,
kills DC because you're missing the heart of that universe. I think
right.
Steve being gone and not being that character, I think has a similar effect at Marvel, and so hopefully they can get it right. I think a step in the right direction. Let us know though, folks. Did you guys pick up Captain America #1 from Chip Zdarsky? If you did, what were your thoughts on it, and why do you think they've had so much trouble getting a Steve Rogers ongoing working as of late? As always, we appreciate your thoughts.